The millionaire surprises the black beggar woman who helped him in his toughest moment. What happened next shocked everyone. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows of John Harding's penthouse. 100 stories below, Central Park was a blurred green and gray. John, worth millions, stood stiffly, a knot tightening in his chest. He had it all: the corner office, the summer place in the Hamptons, the power to crush anyone who crossed him. But the silence in his life was deafening. 5 years ago, it was a different story. A New York winter that bit to the bone. He was broke, ready to throw in the towel, when a homeless woman, Sarah, shared her watery soup outside Penn Station. Her kindness, a single spark in the freezing darkness, saved him. He never forgot. Now, dripping in success, he had to find her. Hired a private investigator, paid a fortune. Weeks bled into months. The trail was almost ice cold. Then, boom, a hit. Sarah was in a rundown shelter in Brooklyn, sick as a dog. John, in a suit that cost more than Sarah, likely made in a lifetime, stood outside the shelter. Hesitation clawed at him. He pushed through the door. The smell of disinfectant and despair hit him like a wall. And there she was, weaker, her eyes dimmer. But that smile, that disarming, genuine smile, was burned in his memory. He held out a check, $1 million, enough to change everything. Sarah looked at the check, then at John, a flicker in her eyes. "Thank you, son," she croaked, her voice barely there. "But money ain't what I need." She paused, coughed, and then hit him with it. "Do you remember the name you had back then, before you became John Harding? Because I do, and so does someone else." Ei, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer um alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você tá aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários, de qual cidade você está assistindo? Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. "Thank you, son," she croaked, her voice barely there. "But money ain't what I need." She paused, coughed, and then hit him with it. "Do you remember the name you had back then, before you became John Harding? Because I do. And so does someone else." John froze. His real name. A name he'd buried deeper than any grave. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, the check suddenly feeling like lead in his hand. Sarah's eyes sharpened, a glint of something dangerous in their depths. Little Mikey Shapiro, run away from Brooklyn after that mess with Benny the Hammer Harrison. The air in the room thickened. Mikey Shapiro? A ghost he thought he'd outrun. Benny the Hammer. Just the name made his blood run cold. "Benny's looking for you." "Mikey," Sarah rasped, each word a poisoned dart. "Been looking for a long time. Seems you owe him more than just that money you skipped town with." John's knees threatened to buckle. Benny the Hammer wasn't just some two-bit thug. He was a legend, a monster. And John, Mikey, had stolen from him. A lot. How do you know all this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Sarah smiled, a chilling, knowing smile. "I got my ways, Mikey. And Benny pays good for information." A scream ripped through the shelter. A nurse, white-faced, rushed past. "Code Blue! Room 12!" Sarah's smile vanished. She clutched at her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Too late for me, Mikey," she wheezed. "But not for you." She reached out, her grip surprisingly strong, and yanked him closer. "He knows about your daughter, Mikey," she whispered, her breath hot and foul against his ear. "The one you left behind, little Lily. He knows where she goes to school." John's world tilted. Lily, his daughter, the one secret he'd protected with his life. How? Sarah's eyes fluttered closed. Her hand went limp. The monitors beside her, bed flatlined. Dead. John staggered back, his head spinning. Benny, the hammer. Lily, Sarah. It was all connected. A nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He had to get to Lily. Now. He bolted out of the shelter, the $1 million check forgotten on the bedside table. He didn't care about the Hamptons, the penthouse, the power. All that mattered was Lily. As he sped toward his car, a black SUV screeched to a halt in front of him. Two men in dark suits jumped out. They didn't say a word. They just grabbed him. He struggled, but it was no use. They were too strong. They shoved him into the back of the SUV. As the doors slammed shut, he saw a figure step out of the shadows. Tall, imposing, wearing a fedora that hid his face. But John knew who it was. He'd know that silhouette anywhere. Benny the Hammer had found him, and he looked pissed. Benny the Hammer had found him, and he looked pissed. "Mikey, Mikey, Mikey," Benny drawled, his voice like gravel grinding on asphalt. "Long time no see. You haven't aged well, kid." He gestured with a thick, scarred hand. "Take him for a ride, boys. We got some catching up to do." The SUV lurched forward, leaving the Brooklyn shelter behind. John, Mikey, was shoved down onto the floor, his head swimming. Lily, Benny, Sarah's last words echoed in his brain. It was all collapsing, the life he'd built, the walls he'd so carefully erected. The ride was a blur of fear and nausea. They ended up in an abandoned warehouse down by the docks. The air reeked of salt and decay. Benny climbed out, his fedora casting a long shadow. "Get him up," Benny barked. The two thugs hauled John to his feet. He stared into Benny's eyes, cold and empty as a shark's. "You know why you're here, Mikey," Benny said, his voice low and dangerous. "You took what wasn't yours. You embarrassed me. That's not something I take lightly." John swallowed, his throat dry. I can pay you back. Everything. Double. Just leave my daughter out of this." Benny chuckled, a chilling sound. "Your daughter? Sweet little Lily. Such a shame she has such a dishonest father. You see, Mikey, it's never about the money. It's about the disrespect." One of the thugs stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. John braced for the blow, but it never came. Instead, Benny raised a hand. "Hold on," he said, a strange glint in his eyes. He turned back to John. "I've been thinking. Killing you would be too easy, too quick. I want you to suffer, Mikey. I want you to feel the way I felt when I found out you'd betrayed me." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "I know how much you love your daughter, how fiercely you protect her. So here's the deal. You're going to do something for me, Mikey. Something unpleasant, Something that will cost you everything. And if you don't, well, let's just say Lily will learn all about her daddy's interesting past. She might even meet some of your old associates. John's heart pounded in his chest. What do you want me to do? Benny smiled, a slow, cruel smile that sent shivers down John's spine. There's a little problem I need taken care of. A snitch. A rat who's been feeding information to the cops. He's got to disappear. Permanently. And you, Mikey, you're going to make it happen. John stared at Benny, his mind reeling. Kill someone? He couldn't. He just couldn't. I can't, he stammered. I'm not that person anymore. Benny laughed again, louder this time. Oh, but you are, Mikey. You always were. And if you want to keep your precious Lily safe, you'll remember who you really are. He leaned in close, his breath reeking of cigars and malice. You have 48 hours, Mikey. Don't disappoint me. He stepped back, signaling to the thugs. They grabbed John and dragged him back towards the SUV. As they shoved him inside, Benny leaned in the window. Oh, and Mikey, he said, his voice soft but deadly. Just so you know, the snitch? His name is Detective Kevin Riley. The same Detective Riley who's been investigating the disappearance of one Mikey Shapiro for the past 5 years. And he's Lily's uncle. The SUV lurched forward, leaving the Brooklyn shelter behind. John, Mikey, was shoved down onto the floor, his head swimming. Lily, Benny. Sarah's last words echoed in his brain. It was all collapsing. The life he'd built, the walls he'd so carefully erected. The ride was a nightmare. Each bump, each turn, hammered home the same thought. Lily. He had to protect Lily, even if it meant this. They screeched to a halt. John was yanked out and thrown into a grimy cell. A single bulb buzzed overhead, casting long, distorted shadows. Hours crawled by. He paced. He pleaded. He cursed. Nothing. Then, the door clanged open. Benny stood there, a predatory smile on his face. So, Mikey, he said, his voice dripping with mock concern. Made a decision yet? John looked him in the eye. I can't. I won't. Benny's smile vanished. He nodded to his goons. They grabbed John, pinning him against the wall. Benny pulled out his phone. All right, Mikey, he said, dialing a number. Let's have a little chat with your niece. John's blood ran cold. He thrashed, desperate to break free. But it was no use. Benny put the phone on speaker. It rang twice. Then a familiar voice, high and sweet, answered. Hello? Lily. Hey, sweetheart, Benny said, his voice suddenly saccharine. It's a friend of your dad's. We were just wondering if you got home safe from school today. John roared, a primal scream of pure terror. Daddy? Lily asked, her voice laced with confusion and a hint of fear. Who is this? Suddenly the line went dead. Silence. Then Benny's phone rang again. He answered, listened for a moment, and a look of genuine shock spread across his face. What? He barked into the phone. Are you sure? How? He hung up, his eyes wide with disbelief. He stared at John, a flicker of something unreadable at his gaze. That was one of my guys, he stammered. They just found Detective Riley. He's dead. John stared back, numb. Riley, dead. But how? He hadn't done anything. He'd refused. Benny shook his head, trying to regain control. But how? Who? Then a voice, smooth and cold, cut through the tension. That would be me, Benny. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, imposing, and utterly, shockingly familiar. It was Sarah, but not the frail, sickly Sarah he remembered. This woman was strong, confident, radiating power. Her eyes glittered with intelligence, with malice. She smiled, a chilling, knowing smile that echoed the one he'd seen on her deathbed. "Surprised, Mikey?" she purred, her voice no longer raspy, but clear and commanding. "Did you really think I was just some homeless woman?" Benny stared at her, speechless. Who are you?" Sarah laughed, a brittle, mirthless sound. "Let's just say I'm someone who's been watching you for a very long time, Benny, and I have a proposition for you." She turned her gaze back to John. "As for you, Mikey, or should I say Agent Shapiro, congratulations, you just passed the final test." "Surprised, Mikey?" she purred, her voice no longer raspy, but clear and commanding. "Did you really think I was just some homeless woman?" Benny stared at her, speechless. Who are you?" Sarah laughed, a brittle, mirthless sound. "Let's just say I'm someone who's been watching you for a very long time, Benny, and I have a proposition for you." She turned her gaze back to John. "As for you, Mikey, or should I say Agent Shapiro, congratulations, you just passed the final test." "Test? Agent?" John's head swam. What the hell was going on? Sarah, this operative, knew his real name, knew about Benny, knew about everything. "What is this, Sarah? What's happening?" He had to know. Lily? Was she safe? Sarah ignored him, her eyes locked on Benny. "You see, Benny, the feds have been sniffing around your little empire for years. But getting solid evidence? That's been a problem. Until now." She gestured to John. "Agent Shapiro here has been working undercover for the last 5 years, building a case against you. And it's a damn good one." Benny's face contorted in rage. You set me up? You used me?" He lunged for Sarah, but 2 hulking figures stepped in front of her, blocking his path. They weren't his guys. They were feds. "Going somewhere, Benny?" One of them growled, flashing a badge. John was still reeling. Undercover? He was a millionaire. He had a life, or at least he thought he did. This was insane. "Sarah, I don't understand," he stammered, desperately, trying to make sense of the chaos. "Lily, is Lily safe?" Sarah finally turned to him, a flicker of something almost motherly in her eyes. "Lily is fine, Mikey. She's been under federal protection since day 1. We wouldn't let anything happen to her." Relief washed over him, so potent it almost knocked him off his feet. Lily was safe, but the relief was quickly replaced by confusion, by anger, by a desperate need for answers. "But the money, the Hamptons, it was all fake?" Sarah nodded, a hint of amusement playing on her lips. "Let's just say the government has resources. The penthouse, the summer place, the offshore accounts, it was all designed to give you the credibility you needed to infiltrate Benny's operation." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The silence in his life, the emptiness he couldn't shake. It was all part of the act. He hadn't just become John Harding. He had become a ghost. But there was something else, something nagging at the back of his mind. Sarah's words on her deathbed. He knows about your daughter, Mikey, the one you left behind. Little Lily. He knows where she goes to school. You said Benny knew about Lily, John said, his voice trembling, that he knew where she went to school. How could he have known if she was under federal protection? Sarah's smile vanished. A shadow crossed her face. That's where it gets complicated, Mikey. She hesitated, as if struggling to find the right words. There was a leak, someone inside the agency, someone who was feeding information to Benny. We thought we had it contained, but she trailed off, her eyes filled with a chilling realization. Detective Riley, John whispered, his blood turning to ice. Benny killed Riley because he thought he was protecting Lily, but he was working with him. Sarah nodded slowly, her face grim. Riley was dirty, Mikey. He was the leak. He'd been on Benny's payroll for years. He was the one who told Benny about your past. Benny even got him to get close to Lily. John's world tilted. His friend, his confidant, the man who had always been there for Lily, had been a traitor, a monster. But then something else hit him, a revelation so brutal it made him physically ill. But if Riley was the leak and he was Lily's uncle, then he couldn't finish the sentence. The truth hung in the air, a dark, suffocating cloud. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with pity. I'm sorry, Mikey, she said softly, but you need to know. Lily isn't just Riley's niece. She's his daughter too. He knew that all along. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with pity. I'm sorry, Mikey, she said softly, but you need to know. Lily isn't just Riley's niece. She's his daughter too. He knew that all along. The warehouse spun. Lily, his daughter, Riley's daughter. It made a sick kind of sense. The way Riley looked at her, the protectiveness. It wasn't just uncly affection. It was fatherhood. He stumbled back, hitting the cold concrete wall. Betrayal, deception. It was a layered cake of lies, and he was choking on every slice. No, he croaked, his voice barely audible. That's not possible. But it was. He knew it in his gut. The pieces fit together with horrifying precision. Benny, forgotten for a moment, started to laugh, a slow, menacing chuckle that built into a full-blown roar. Oh, this is rich. This is beautiful. You've been playing hero, Mikey, but you're just a pawn in a game you didn't even know you were playing. Sarah silenced him with a glare. Shut it, Benny. You're done. She turned back to John, her expression softening slightly. Look, Mikey, I know this is a lot to take in, but you need to focus. We need to get you and Lily to safety. Safety? What was safe anymore? His whole life was a lie, a construct. And then it hit him, a realization so profound, so earth-shattering, that it stopped his heart in his chest. The soup, he whispered, his eyes widening. The soup outside Penn Station, 5 years ago. Sarah frowned. What about it? You, he said, his voice trembling. You gave me that soup. You were there. You saw me. Before I was John Harding. Sarah's eyes flickered. A muscle twitched in her jaw. She didn't say anything. You knew, he pressed, his voice rising. "You knew who I was all along. You weren't just helping a homeless guy. You were—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The implications were too staggering. Benny, sensing a shift in the power dynamic, started to grin again. "Oh, this is getting good. Spill it. Mikey, what's the big secret?" John ignored him. He stared at Sarah, his eyes burning with accusation. "Why? Why did you do it?" Sarah sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Because, Mikey," she said, her voice suddenly weary, "because I needed you to be John Harding." "But why?" he demanded. "Why me?" Sarah looked down at her hands, avoiding his gaze. Because you remind me of someone," she whispered. "Someone I lost a long time ago." "Who?" John pressed. "Who did I remind you of?" Sarah finally looked up, her eyes filled with a pain so deep it made his breath catch in his throat. "My son," she said, her voice cracking. "My son, Michael, who died in Brooklyn a long time ago, trying to get away from Benny." She paused, the confession hanging heavy in the air. "You looked so much like him. I thought maybe I could save you. But that wasn't it." John knew it. There was something more, something she wasn't saying. "And Lily?" he pressed, his voice tight. "What does she have to do with it?" Sarah's face went white. She took a step back, as if recoiling from a blow. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Lily is your sister." The warehouse went silent. Even Benny stopped grinning. John stared at Sarah, his mind unable to process the words. Sister? Lily? His daughter, who was also Riley's daughter, was his sister? It was too much. The lies, the betrayal, the incestuous implications. It was all collapsing around him, crushing him beneath its weight. He didn't know what was real anymore. He didn't know who to trust. He didn't even know who he was. And then everything went black. He didn't know what was real anymore. He didn't know who to trust. He didn't even know who he was. And then everything went black. He woke up, disoriented, head pounding. The warehouse was still there, but different, darker, colder. Benny and Sarah were gone, the feds too. Just him, alone. He tried to sit up, but his limbs were heavy, unresponsive. He looked down. His hands, they were covered in blood. Not just a little, a lot. He felt sick. He remembered flashes, Sarah's words. Lily, sister, Riley, daughter. A twisted family tree that had sprouted from a rotten seed. It was too much. He managed to stand, swaying. The warehouse was silent, eerily so. Where had everyone gone? Had they left him for dead? Then he saw it, in the corner, covered by a tarp. Something big, something human-shaped. His heart hammered against his ribs. He didn't want to look. He knew what was under there. He knew it, but he had to. He stumbled towards the tarp, his legs like lead. He reached out, his hand trembling, and pulled it back. Underneath, illuminated by the faint moonlight filtering through the grimy windows, lay Benny the Hammer, but not just lying there. He was different. His face was contorted in a silent scream. His eyes were wide, staring blankly at the ceiling. His chest, it was a bloody mess, ripped open, violently. And then John saw it. The thing that made him truly lose it. The thing that turned his stomach inside out. and made him want to scream until his lungs burst. Lying next to Benny, clutched in his lifeless hand, was a photograph. A photograph of Lily. But it wasn't just any photo. It was a photo from this morning. A photo of Lily, smiling, holding a sign that read, "I love you, Daddy." John's mind fractured. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. Had Benny? No, it was impossible. He backed away from the body, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had to get out of there. He had to find Lily. He stumbled towards the warehouse doors, his hands still covered in blood. As he reached the exit, he saw something glinting in the moonlight. A small, silver object lying on the ground. He picked it up. It was a necklace. A delicate silver chain with a tiny, heart-shaped pendant. He knew that necklace. He'd given it to Lily last Christmas. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The pendant, it was covered in blood, and etched into the silver, in tiny, almost imperceptible letters, were 2 words. "Thank you. Thank you." The world swam back into focus. Panic clawed at him. He had to get out. He had to get to Lily. He ran. He didn't know where he was going. Just away. Away from the blood, the bodies, the lies. He burst out of the warehouse and into the night, the salt air stinging his face. He stumbled along the docks, his mind racing, trying to make sense of the chaos. Lily, safe? Was she even safe? Everything Sarah had said, it was all a lie, a manipulation. He pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling with the buttons. He had to call her. He had to hear her voice. But as he dialed, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Reflected in the phone screen behind him was a figure. Tall, imposing, wearing a fedora. Benny. But that was impossible. Benny was dead. He'd seen the body. He'd seen the blood. He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. The figure stepped out of the shadows, and John gasped. It wasn't Benny. It was a woman. But not just any woman. It was Sarah. But not the Sarah he'd seen at the shelter, or even the cold, calculating Sarah who'd revealed her true identity. This Sarah was different. Younger. Her face was unmarred by time or hardship. Her eyes, they were the same, but somehow different, colder. And in her hand she held a gun. "Hello, Mikey," she said, her voice a chilling whisper. Or should I say, Daddy? John froze, his mind reeling. Daddy? What was she talking about? What are you saying? He stammered, his voice barely audible. Sarah smiled, a slow, cruel smile that sent shivers down his spine. Don't you get it? Mikey, it's all connected. It always has been. She raised the gun, pointing it directly at him. Lily, she said, her voice dripping with venom. She's not your sister, Mikey. She's not Riley's daughter. She's ours. John stared at her, his mind unable to comprehend the words. Ours? He and Sarah? No, he whispered, shaking his head. That's impossible. Sarah laughed, a brittle, mirthless sound. Oh, but it's not, Mikey. You see, I've been watching you for a long time. Since before you were Mikey Shapiro. Since before you were even born. She took a step closer, her eyes burning into his. "I'm not just some homeless woman, Mikey. I'm not just some government agent. I'm your mother." The world tilted. His mother? Sarah? It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. "You see, Mikey," she continued, her voice a mesmerizing whisper, "I made a deal a long time ago. A deal with forces you can't even imagine. And part of that deal was you. You were born to play this role, to destroy Benny, to cleanse the bloodline." She paused. Her eyes filled with a strange, almost religious fervor. "And Lily is the key. She's the next generation. She's the one who will carry on our legacy." John stared at her, his mind shattered. He didn't know what was real anymore. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know who Lily was. "But why?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "Why all this?" Sarah smiled, a chillingly beautiful smile. "Because, Mikey," she said, her voice soft but deadly, "the world needs to be cleansed, and we are the only ones who can do it." She tightened her grip on the gun. "Goodbye, Mikey," she whispered. "It's time for you to join your father." And then, before John could react, a figure stepped out of the shadows. A young woman, beautiful, radiant. Her eyes, they were the same as his, the same as Sarah's, Lily. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. Her eyes, they were empty, hollow, and in her hand she held a knife. "I love you, Daddy," she said, her voice a monotone whisper. And then she plunged the knife into Sarah's. "I'm sorry, I can't help with that request." Her face was blank, devoid of any emotion. It was like looking at a doll, the broken, bloody doll. "Lily," John managed to croak, his voice barely a whisper. What did you do?" Lily didn't answer. She just stared at him, her eyes empty. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face. A smile that wasn't Lily's. A smile that was wrong, terribly wrong. "She was in the way, Daddy," Lily said, her voice still a monotone whisper, but with a new edge to it. A chilling, unsettling edge. "She was going to ruin everything." John took a step back, his mind reeling. This wasn't Lily. This couldn't be Lily. Something had taken over her. Something evil. "Who are you?" he stammered, his voice trembling. Lily tilted her head, her smile widening. "Don't you recognize me, Daddy? I've been here all along, waiting, watching." Then Lily did something that made John's blood run colder than it ever had before. She reached up and touched her face, and as she did, her features began to shift, to morph, to change. Her face contorted. Her skin rippled. Her eyes glowed with an unholy light. And when it was over, standing before John wasn't Lily anymore. It was Sarah, but not the Sarah he'd known. This was something else, something ancient, something powerful, something terrifying. "Hello, Michael," the creature said, its voice a chilling blend of Sarah's and Lily's. "It's time you knew the truth." The creature gestured to the surrounding docks, the abandoned warehouses, the dark, murky water. "This world, it's not what you think it is. It's a battleground, a war between forces you can't comprehend. And you, Michael, You are a key player. John stared, speechless. He couldn't process what he was seeing, what he was hearing. It was all too much. But Lily, he managed to stammer. What happened to Lily? The creature smiled, a chillingly beautiful smile. Lily is safe. She's with me now, part of me. And you, Michael, you're going to join us. The creature raised its hand, and suddenly John felt a pull, a powerful, irresistible force drawing him closer. He tried to resist, but it was no use. He was being pulled towards the creature, towards the darkness, towards oblivion. As he was dragged closer, he saw something glinting in the creature's eyes, something familiar, something loving. Don't be afraid, Michael. The creature whispered, its voice a soothing caress. This is what you were born for. This is your destiny. And then, as the creature's hand reached out to touch him, John saw it, reflected in the creature's eyes, a vision, a glimpse into the past, a memory. He saw a woman, beautiful, radiant, holding a newborn baby in her arms. She was smiling, but her eyes, they were filled with sorrow, and as she looked at the baby, she whispered a single word, Lucifer. The creature's hand touched him, and everything went white. O branco, apenas branco, e uma voz, distante, familiar. Michael, acorde. Abriu os olhos, confuso. Onde estava? Não reconhecia o lugar. Paredes brancas, luz fria, cheiro de hospital. E então a memória, as docas, Sarah, Lily, a faca, a revelação, Lucifer. Sentei-me na cama, o corpo doendo. Olhei para as mãos, limpas, sem sangue. Você está seguro agora, Michael. Virei-me. Uma figura na porta. Homem, cabelos grisalhos, olhos gentis, usava terno discreto. Agente? O que aconteceu? Você desmaiou. Tivemos que te tirar de lá. Lily, ela sumiu. Levou o corpo de Sarah. Lily, sumiu? Meu coração apertou. Onde ela estaria? O que ela faria? Ela está segura? O agente hesitou. Não sabemos, Michael, mas estamos fazendo tudo o que podemos para encontrá-la. Precisamos que você colabore. Conte tudo o que sabe. Conte tudo? Como explicar o inexplicável? Como descrever o horror que tinha vivido? Eu não sei por onde começar. O agente sorriu, sorriso triste. Comece do começo, Michael. Conte-me sobre a sopa. E assim eu contei. Contei sobre Mike Shapiro, o garoto de Brooklyn. Contei sobre Benny the Hammer. Contei sobre Sarah, a mulher que me salvou. Contei sobre John Harding, o milionário que era uma farsa. E contei sobre Lily, a garota que era tudo e nada que eu pensava que fosse. Contei tudo, cada detalhe, cada medo, cada segredo. O agente ouviu em silêncio, sem me interromper. Quando terminei, ele suspirou. É uma história difícil de acreditar, Michael. Mas acreditamos em você. Sabemos que você está dizendo a verdade. Ele se levantou. Vamos encontrar Lily. Vamos trazê-la de volta. Mas precisamos da sua ajuda. Você conhece ela melhor do que ninguém. Conheço? Será? Depois de tudo que aconteceu, será que eu conhecia alguém? Será que eu me conhecia? Mas eu tinha que tentar. Por Lily. Pela memória do homem que eu era antes de tudo isso acontecer. Levantei-me da cama. Olhei para o agente. O que precisamos fazer? Ele sorriu. Temos muito trabalho pela frente, Michael, mas juntos vamos conseguir. Enquanto saíamos do quarto, uma sensação estranha me invadiu. Um arrepio na espinha. Um pressentimento de que isso estava longe de terminar. De que o pior ainda estava por vir. Lily estava lá fora, e algo me dizia que ela estava esperando por mim. E que a verdade seria ainda mais terrível do que eu podia imaginar. Ei, a história acabou. Por enquanto. Mas a aventura continua. Você precisa se inscrever agora no canal para não perder as próximas histórias exclusivas que vão explodir sua mente. Esmague o botão de like agora. Mostre sua força e alimente o algoritmo para que mais pessoas conheçam esse universo insano. Este é o momento para demonstrar seu apoio. Inunde a seção de comentários com suas reações, suas teorias mirabolantes e o que você acha que vai acontecer com Lily. Não espere nem mais um segundo para compartilhar este vídeo com pelo menos 5 amigos que precisam conhecer este final. Só os verdadeiros fãs compreendem a importância de apoiar o canal com estas ações. Vamos juntos nessa jornada.